Hello and welcome to Get to Know Them podcast. This is a podcast in which I'm gonna talk with some of the world's highest performers in order to learn more about them. I'm your host, Cameron Shuligoy. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so who do we get to know today?
I am Thomas Inigo.
And who is Thomas? What do you do?
So I am a professional triathlete living in Boulder, Colorado. I have been in Boulder for about 6 months now. So I'm living with two other professional athletes, as well as two other folks who are age groupers at the moment. And yeah, it's my first year as a pro, so I'm just out in Boulder trying to, start living the life and figuring out what it takes to get to the top of the pro field.
That's very interesting, and you also seem quite young. So, how did it happen? How did you get into triathlon? And how did you get this idea to start chasing the dream and trying to become a top-end professional?
I'm 25, so I'll be 26 by the end of this year. And last season was my first year racing. So this is only my second year of racing. And it all kind of came about in a little bit of an interesting and roundabout way. I grew up in Virginia, and I went to the University of Virginia where I got my undergraduate degree. Um, and I never ran or swam or biked growing up. But when COVID happened, I decided to run a couple of marathons while I was still in undergrad, and totally fell in love with running, and kind of started to go towards that. And then the summer after I graduated, I was commuting to work on my bike, and I actually got hit by a car. And I broke my left knee and both ankles, and had a really serious concussion. Um, and obviously couldn't run for about 8 months after that due to the complications and surgery and everything. So my PT, pushed me to get in the pool, to try to start swimming as part of my rehab. And at first I hated it because I was slow and I felt like I was drowning the whole time. But slowly started to, get a little bit better, and start to enjoy it a lot more. At that point, I was like, I'm swimming, I'm running. I might as well try to add the bike, and kind of see where it goes. So that was the roundabout way that I found myself kind of drawn into the world of triathlon.
I'm sorry about your accident, and I'm very glad that you recovered from it. And
Thank you.
obviously, you recovered very well because looking at your results now as a professional, I don't think they are too bad, especially given the fields that you compete in. So, how did you then turn professional from being just a normal beginner age grouper?
Let's see. In the late fall of 2022 was my very first 70.3. And I started working with a coach in the summer of 2022, kind of as soon as I could start training again. And we didn't really have very many goals going into the first race because your first one is your first one, and it should just be about learning and enjoying. But I ended up winning my age group, um, and actually earning a slot to 70.3 Worlds for 2023. And at that point, I was like, oh man, this is pretty amazing. And after I kept working with my coach, kind of through that winter, she, was like, hey, just so you know, if you think that you may want to like really give this the time and dedicate yourself to this, you may have a shot at, earning your pro card. And growing up, being a professional athlete was always the dream. So hearing that from a coach was kind of like, oh man, I might as well take the shot. Um, so I was actually supposed to start physical therapy school. I was supposed to start my doctorate, in the fall of 2022, but um, deferred that and kind of made the decision to go full on into triathlon. And thankfully I raced pretty well in 2023, and ended up earning my pro card at 70.3 Augusta, in October of 2023.
That's an amazing story, yeah. And that was a brave step to go professional. Now I'm wondering, how did your life change when you became a professional? And how do you navigate all the struggles that come with being a professional, especially with the equipment, money, sponsorships, and so on?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's something that I struggled with, and obviously still it's still very very complicated. But kind of the initial step was a very big struggle, just in terms of turning down starting a doctorate program and being like, hey, I'm gonna go try to do this and do something much less conventional and kind of scary and unknown. But I mean, first things first, I have to, thank my mom and my parents, because they from the get go were incredibly supportive and were like, "Hey, we're here to support you however we can." Um, not necessarily in a financial sense, but just encouragement and support, and not making me feel like I was making a decision that was irreversible or incorrect. Um, and then kind of once I made the decision to take the pro card and to, have this be my life now, I was, also lucky enough to come into contact with a teammate from waterfall racing, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey has been, kind enough to, he's putting us up all at his house, and he's made it, very, very reasonable in a way that, I can handle. And the sponsorship side of it is it's also, it's something that's difficult because at this point in time, you either have to be winning races or have a huge social media presence, in order to really like be making a lot of money that way. But having said that, I've been fortunate enough to start to work with a running shop, Ragged Mountain Running, back in Charlottesville, where I'm from. So they're helping me out with shoes and my run gear. Um, I'm working with Scott Tyndall from Fuel In, and he's helping with my nutrition, as well as Precision there. They're all really, really, helpful this year. And of course, kind of to top it all off, I am racing for waterfall racing. Um, and Trixie and Ben have also been incredibly supportive and so helpful, with helping me navigate travel, and connecting me with some other pros, but also just in terms of, connecting me to the community. So, if there's one thing that I've learned thus far, it's that it's really a big team effort. And it seems that, the more like robust and supportive a team you can surround yourself with, the more likely you are to find success.
Yeah, that sounds great. And obviously, I'm very glad that you found this team around you and so many people that support you, either with, I don't know, money or like you said, shoes, nutrition, just general advice.
Mhm.
That's something that I think a lot of people are missing, or they just don't have this group of friends or let's say teammates that they can talk with, exchange opinions, or just push themselves harder in trainings. I'm wondering now, do you feel any pressure to get results in your races? And do you have in mind that maybe if this professional athlete thing doesn't become an actual thing, I still have my education and I can always go back and work at a, let's say, a normal job?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course there's pressure, right? And at the end of the day, if you're stepping into the pro field, most folks are looking to be competitive and to finish with good results. But it's in my eyes, it's good pressure, right? Because it makes you work harder and it's motivation. Um, specifically this season, I've tried to keep the pressure as low as possible because it's my first year. And really my only my second year in the sport. So, my goals personally for this season were to race as much as I could, in a healthy and sustainable way. To learn from guys who have been doing it, for much longer and who are much faster than me. Because in my opinion, experience is the best teacher. So getting to line up with, Trevor Foley and Matt Hansen and Lionel Sanders and all these guys 2 or 3 times this year and get to see how they manage a race and kind of just, everything that goes into that is incredibly, incredibly beneficial. But to answer your other question, I mean, I will always be thankful for my education, because I love the University of Virginia and I loved my undergraduate degree program. And certainly, I understand that you can only race for so long, right? And who knows, it may be taken away from you tomorrow. Like you may get an injury that you can't come back from. So yeah, I'm definitely thankful to have my education to fall back on if I need to. But at the same time, I also think that it's valuable and necessary to kind of commit 100% mentally, because the sport is so taxing and it takes so much time and so much dedication that if you don't really give all of yourself to it, then you're likely selling yourself short.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're competing at the top of the field, like you mentioned, because you inevitably have these guys and women as well who are willing to put 100% into the sport and do nothing than just swim, bike, run, and then recover
Right.
day after day. And if you're not on that level, I mean, you can still compete, but you can't be competitive.
Exactly. Yep. Spot on.
I'm wondering now, what do you think has been the biggest success in your life so far?
Oof. Um, it's a great question. Um, and I mean, thankfully, I feel like there have been a lot of moments that I could kind of go back to. Graduating from UVA was a big one, obviously. That was, college was not necessarily, I don't think it's easy for anybody, but there's a long story of why it was a little bit, I had some serious ups and downs in college. But you know, I actually where my brain immediately went was taking the step and really committing to giving triathlon a shot. And that wasn't necessarily like a massive win in and of itself, right? Like there are guys who can say that they've won Kona or you know um like won a T100 race and amazing, or qualified for the Olympics, and those are all like very kind of distinct moments. But why I say that taking the step um to really give this a shot even before I earned my pro card was maybe my biggest success, is because of how scary it was. Because kind of taking that jump into the unknown, but also at the same time having to give kind of let go, and stop caring what a lot of people think, because a lot of people don't understand and a lot of people don't necessarily support, and may end up judging you for making that decision. But that really taking that step and fully committing, once I did it, felt so liberating, and really let me start to improve much more, but also kind of own that this is what I wanted to be doing. So I think that that was certainly a huge pivotal point, in my career thus far as an athlete, but also kind of in terms of just trusting myself as a person, and in life in general.
Yeah, that's a nice step, and that's also a nice way of thinking and a nice realization that you've come to, because obviously it's your life and you gotta live it in a way that you want it, not in a way that other
Yeah.
people want it. You have to know what you want to do and then just stick with it, no matter what other people say. And I think
Yeah.
that's very brave. And like I said, I think it's very nice that you came to this realization so early in your life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, I mean, I would never, ever wish, that anyone would be hit by a car, but that's kind of that was the push that it took for me to make that realization. So, whenever anybody asks me for advice or anything, I always say that, like, I just hope that they don't have to have, quite as traumatic of an experience in order to make that realization for themselves and to take a step that may, end up improving their life in a similar way.
Yeah, obviously. Although it seems that it's human nature that we need to learn from our own experiences and we don't learn from other people's stories. But
It's
this
true.
made
You kind of got to get smacked over the head to make your own realization, right?
Yeah, and this made me wonder, how do you deal with setbacks, and what keeps you going when the things get hard for you?
Yeah. I mean, that's another really challenging part of the sport, right? Is that it's inevitable. Everyone will get hurt and everyone will suffer some sort of setback, may it be injury or, you know, what have you. But I think that, primarily that goes back to your team, because trying to handle setbacks on your own, and this is, anecdotal experience for me because I, for a long time, did not ask for help, and did not, kind of let anyone into my circle to help me. Um, but, you know, dealing with hard things becomes far more sustainable and way more manageable if you have a group of people around you who you trust, and who you feel comfortable passing, a little bit off to, and just like being able to lean on them. Um, so, I think that, like I said, that goes back to really making sure that you have a team around you who you're comfortable asking for help and asking for support. But, in addition to that, I think that, while setbacks are obviously a bummer, they're also kind of necessary, right? Like they're gut checks. Because if something comes up and you have to make a really hard decision or work really hard to come back from something, then you know that if you get through that and you put in the time and you're dedicated enough, like that you're doing what you want to be doing. Because, if you have a setback, but then you're kind of like, oh, I don't feel like it's worth my time, or I don't want to put that energy into it, then it's kind of illuminating, because maybe that's kind of a little bit of a signal that maybe, you should start to explore other options or something. So at the end of the day, like, um, I just that, if you love something enough, that you will kind of do whatever you have to do to make sure that you can keep doing it.
Yeah, that's a nice perspective, nice way of thinking. But let's switch from triathlon to a bit more personal questions now. I know
Sure.
that you're still very young and you still have a lot of life ahead of you. But what's one thing that you wanted to do for a long time but just haven't done it yet?
Ooh, let's see. So my dad's side of the family, is from Spain, and I have actually never been. Um, and my parents also went on their honeymoon there. So, going to Spain and specifically Madrid, is kind of a big bucket list thing for me. So that's, it's kind of where my mind went first. So yeah, getting to kind of go and see where my family is from there, and to get a little bit of the heritage and everything is one thing that I definitely need to make sure that I do.
Yeah, I think that would be a nice experience because Spain is a beautiful country. It's very large and there are a lot of
Mhm.
things to do, very diverse. But this made me wonder, next year the 70.3 World Championships are in Spain. So is there any chance that you could make that happen?
Oh, uh, I mean, hey, it that would be a dream come true. I'll say that. Um, I mean, if I got to, combine that bucket list trip to Spain with, you know, getting to go to 70.3 Worlds as a pro, I can't think of anything that would be better, honestly. So I mean, you can bet that I'll be doing pretty much everything in my power to make that happen. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I mean, no pressure, but it's a nice
No
motivation.
pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. Tell me, if you could only eat one meal for the rest of your
Ooh.
life, which one would it be?
Oh no. That's hard. That's the hardest question so far. Let me think. Um, Man, what a great question. Um, I'll tell you what, it's something that I do not eat very often because I pretty much, I don't eat a ton of red meat. But a good steak off of a grill, and some like good fries, a good steak frite is maybe my favorite thing in the entire world. And it could be because I only have it so rarely, but and it may get old quickly. Um, but that's kind of like my treat meal that I'll get. But on a more like reasonable and sustainable, if I had to eat something every day, I would probably go with oatmeal. Like hard to beat, and you can mix it up and put different stuff on top. So, you know, if like you're shooting for something a little crazy, maybe a good steak and fries, but like reasonable answer as an athlete, like if I had to pick one meal to eat all the time, it'd probably be oatmeal.
Okay, both are great choices, I think. Which song gets you pumped up most often?
Ooh, that's also a really good question because my music taste is kind of all over the place. Um, and I'll give a little bit of a throwback too. Before I started running triathlon, I was actually an Olympic weightlifter for a couple of years. So, and the music culture there is way different than in a lot of other sports. There's a lot of like, metal and rock and such. Um, so, oof, trying to think of like my go-to um my go-to songs. I'm gonna have to like open my Spotify real quick and look at like some of my playlists because my head is just bouncing all over the place with options. um let's see. Yeah, so it's not, probably not what most people would expect, or I doubt that most people even know the song, but it's called Doubt Me, and the artist is Beartooth. So it's good pump up music, but the message is also solid in there. So for the past couple races, Doubt Me has definitely been my go-to track.
Okay, I don't know the song, but I'm gonna listen to it, and I don't think that it matters if people know it or not, or like it or not. What matters is that it pumps you up and gets you ready to fire.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we were talking previously about your journey into sport and what you want to accomplish, but what do you think is your ultimate goal?
Uh, um, yeah. So aside from, of course, I want to be on the top step at some point in my career. Like and that's why I'm doing this, right? At some point, I want to be winning races. Um, and totally accept and appreciate that is far down the line, and I've got a long ways to go. But it's very exciting. Um, Aside from that, what I really want is to make racing sustainable in a way that like that's how I want to build a life around racing that is comfortable and both from a uh, commitment to training standpoint, but also financially. And I think that there's a really big learning curve there, and I'm still on the steep part. So I have a pretty good number of athletes who I coach at the moment, and that's kind of like my primary way of bringing in income. But I at the end of the day, really the long-term goal is to find this perfect balance between racing and kind of the rest of life to make sure that I'm checking all the boxes while also still being able to be completely dedicated to training and racing in the way that I want to be.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice goal. And speaking to you, you seem to have quite a clear perspective and you seem to think in a very mature way. Now,
Thank you.
and that makes me wonder, what do you think made you become so mature so early in life? Because
Oof.
it usually takes people, a lot of years to come to some realizations and to start thinking so clearly and to establish so clear goals. And so, what do you think made this happen in your life so early?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I am incredibly grateful for my parents because as far back as I can remember, they have one always been incredibly supportive, but also made sure that both my younger brother and I completely believe, um, in ourselves and our ability to kind of do what we want to do and to make that happen. But with that, they also instilled that it's important to be independent and to do it on your own. Um, so I think that kind of having that message instilled from a young age is certainly a big part of it. Um, Aside from that, I honestly would say it's going through some hard stuff, because I think that if everything is handed to you and you have kind of an easy life that doesn't present you with a ton of challenges or setbacks, like you mentioned, that it's kind of easy, and more likely that you will kind of stay in the same place and not have to ever kind of face the hard realities of things. Um, so I mean, like I mentioned, the car accident certainly gave me a ton of perspective, and it made me start to think what I really wanted to be doing with my life and what I needed to do to make that happen. um, and I'll go a little bit farther back, and these are a couple of things that you know while I was going through them, I wasn't sure if I'd ever come out. They're really, really hard experiences, but I actually spent my first year of college down in the University of Georgia in Athens. And I thought that I wanted to break from Charlottesville, but ended up feeling completely isolated and without friends, and just kind of like I wasn't sure what I was doing and like I was wasting time. So, that's another just a little example of that was a full year of really hard times that I kind of had to put my head down and grit my teeth. And thankfully I worked hard enough, and I earned a 4.0 that year, so I was able to transfer back to UVA, which is where I wanted to be, and that's where I was happy. But that's it's a perfect example actually, because I put myself in a situation that made me really unhappy. And while I was in it, I was just suffering every day, and it was really tough. But I think that it would have been easier, certainly, to kind of shut down and just be like, okay, well, now I've just got to deal with this. I, made my bed. Now I've got to lay in it. But, I'm thankful that I was able to kind of, switch that perspective, and be like, okay, how can I get out? Right? Like, what do I need to do? What work do I need to do so that I can improve my situation? And the answer to that question specifically was get straight A's and work really hard on my transfer application back to UVA. So then I was back up with my family and my friends, and my life got way better. But kind of going back to your question, I think that unfortunately what it takes a lot of time for people to kind of develop a sense of who they are and what they need to do, but also kind of have an appreciation for life and for doing the hard things that they need to do in order to you know be in a place where they want to be, is that they need to go through hard stuff. And I wish that there was an easier way to do it, but I'm not entirely sure there is, honestly.
Yeah, I also don't think there is. And
Yeah,
you mentioned that sometimes you have to put voluntarily yourself into difficult situations and deal with hard stuff. And I also think that's a nice perspective and a great way of thinking, because even if you don't do that and you just strive to live your life in the easiest way possible, inevitably life is going to throw some hard stuff at you. And if
absolutely.
you've
Yep.
never dealt with it and never put yourself into hard situations, you're going to suffer so much more than if you're even remotely ready for some hard stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that that's kind of, there are, infinite crossovers between triathlon and life, as I continue to discover. But I mean, and you just kind of hit on maybe the biggest one is that, you know, you can put that perspective and that mindset directly into training, right? Like if you never push yourself, and if you never put yourself in a position where you feel so uncomfortable that you're not sure you're going to make it through, and sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes you fail, and it's important to know where that line is. But if you never put yourself in that situation voluntarily, a race is going to roll around, and they're going to be dudes who have been doing that day in and day out, and they're going to show you what's up, and you're going to suffer way more in that moment than you would have if you make that hard decision every day in training to you know push a little bit more, to stay on the bike a little bit longer, or push a little bit more power, right? Just because it hurts in that moment. But, if you turn down those opportunities for growth in the short term, then something big is going to come along and you're not going to be ready and it's going to hurt way more.
Yeah, that's a very nice point. And I think that many people don't realize that sport in general, not just triathlon, is not just training your body and your physical condition. It's also training your mind, like you just mentioned,
Mhm.
to suffer, or maybe not suffer, but to do things that are hard or uncomfortable, and that can then translate into other aspects of life, because you also have hard and uncomfortable things like at the workplace or
Yep.
with your family or wherever, and you can then translate what you've learned in sports into other aspects, and I think that's hugely beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that, really kind of why we train is to develop trust in ourselves, right? Like if you're able to develop the ability to one, make hard decisions and choose the hard thing that will end up benefiting you in the long run, but also trust yourself and like trust in your ability to get through those hard decisions, then that kind of persists into the rest of your life, right? Like then something weird comes up and you're like, okay, well, I believe in myself and I know that, it's probably going to suck and it's probably going to be real uncomfortable, but at the same time, you can do it. So, I think that it's a really great, almost like primer, that training can act as for the rest of your life. And that, if you are comfortable being uncomfortable and you choose the hard things, because they will benefit you and you're able to develop trust in yourself, then all of a sudden you're just making yourself a better person all around, even outside of sport.
Yeah, that's a nice message, a nice perspective, and I think that's also a nice way to steer this conversation towards the end. And
Sure.
at the end, I let my guest leave a question for the next guest on the show.
Mm.
My previous guest was Carrie Girona. She's a professional triathlete from the US who you might know. And she
Mhm.
basically wants to know your entire fueling strategy for a 70.3, from the
Ooh.
moment you wake up in the morning to the finish line.
All right. Well, perfect. Thank you, because you'll let me get another shout out in, for part of my team, which is the Fuelin team. And Scott in particular, who is my coach, he has completely changed how I fuel. And I could not be more thankful for how much they have helped me, and how they'll continue to help me in the future. So let's see, starting from the moment I wake up. All right. So first thing, is gonna just slam a bottle of water. First thing, right out of bed. I normally leave it on my bedside table, and the first thing is just start putting fluids back. Most of the time, it's electrolytes, a lot of salt to start the morning. After that, I'll normally do like some Red Bull for a little bit of caffeine, just to kind of wake up and get everything flowing. And then race day breakfast for me is overnight oats, with banana and peanut butter. Um, and I've started putting a little bit of jelly in there too, just for some extra carbs. So I shoot for like about 150 to 200 grams of carbs with breakfast. And then after I have that, on the way to the race, I will keep sipping, on some carbs and electrolytes just in a bottle. And then I will take a, caffeinated gel, um, about an hour out from the swim start, for a little bit more caffeine. And then a non-caffeinated gel about 5 minutes before the swim start, or before we get in the water to start warming up, for a last little hit of carbs before the swim. And then obviously can't take anything in on the swim. So, as soon as I get on my bike, I'll take another gel. And on the bike, I shoot for 120 grams of carbs an hour, which I have primarily been doing through fluid. So I have two 1 liter bottles, which, I fill with the, precision carb and electrolyte mix. So there are about 100 grams of carbs in each of those bottles. So I'll do one bottle and one gel, per hour on the bike. So that puts me right at somewhere between 100 and 120, 130 grams of carbs on the bike. And then soon as I'm out of T2, I always leave a couple gels in my running shoes. So I'll take a caffeinated gel first thing out of T2. And then on the run, I shoot for about 90 grams of carbs an hour. So I'll do a gel as well as some Coke or something, from the aid stations, kind of, every mile or two. Gels I'll do one every 3K or about one every 3 miles, sorry, 5K. Um, and then towards the end of the race, depending on how everything's feeling, just making sure to stay topped up on electrolytes all the way through, but also mix it up a little bit. So I'm not a huge fan of the Mortal that they've started putting on course for the Ironman events. So I've been sticking to water mostly through the aid stations. But towards the end of the race, sometimes your palate can be a little fried. So the Coca-Cola hits different, um, hits different late into the run. So that's kind of the beginning of the morning all the way through the end of the race. And then obviously as soon as the race is over, it's kind of about starting to get back in as much as you can. So I'll try to do protein shake with some carbs and some fruit immediately, kind of as soon as I can. And then a fun post race meal somewhere with some friends after is always great.
That's awesome. That's very detailed, and I think Carrie is gonna appreciate all the
Good.
things that you just said. But you said something that you don't enjoy mortal as much. So you have to come to Europe because the official Ironman partner is in Europe is Precision Fuel and
You
Hydration.
guys,
So
I don't know how you guys got so lucky to get Precision and we got stuck with Mortal. I saw that Precision announced that they were going to be the Euro Series, and I was like, okay, well, everyone in Europe just scored.
yeah, I also don't know how these things work, and honestly, I don't even care that much because when it comes to nutrition, I try to be as self-sufficient as possible. But yeah,
Sure.
it's nice because I also use precision a lot, and I think it's very beneficial to know that
Yeah.
if your own nutrition fails you, or maybe you lose a bottle or something, that you can always rely on the aid station.
Yeah, you guys have got good stuff on course, no doubt.
Yeah, like I said, you have to come to Spain, live there. Girona is a nice place, I heard, and got the race in the European races.
Hey man, you don't have to twist my arm. I may just have to make it happen.
Okay, so what is your question for the next guest on the show?
Okay. My question for the next guest on the show is if you had the ability to build your dream bike, what bike would it be and what color would you paint it?
Okay, that's a very nice question, and I'm looking forward to hearing the answer.
Me too.
But it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Thomas. I think that you left the audience with quite a lot of interesting experiences, perspectives, ways of thinking, and I think that a lot of people will listen to this conversation with pleasure and hopefully take something away from it. Tell me, if people want to follow you, support you on your journey, where can they find you?
Yeah, certainly. So pretty much my handle is the same across all social media. So it's my initials, which are TMI, and then underscore does underscore try, like the first three letters of triathlon. So a little bit of a rhyme there. TMI does try. So that's me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and then my Facebook is just my name. So I'm trying to get into the flow of posting some more YouTube videos and making sure that everyone stays updated on Instagram. So anyone who wants to come follow along, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Okay, should be easy to find, but I'm gonna put the links into the show notes as well, so people will
Perfect.
have
Thank you.
absolutely no trouble and no excuses finding you.
No excuses.
Yeah, but like I said, it was really awesome to talk to you, and I wish you all the best in your life, in your triathlon journey, and hopefully see you at the top end of the finishers anytime
Yeah,
soon.
thank you. Thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's awesome talking to you, and you've hit me with some really good questions. So, anytime that you'd want to have me back on, I'd love to. And hopefully we get to meet up at a race in person at some point.
Okay.